Welcome back, and in this video I'm going to share with you the 8 things I wish I knew before working with former prisoners. By way of brief introduction, my name's Joe Hortight, and I was fortunate to serve as the service manager for an iwi-led Kaupapa Maori male-only reintegration service here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Now, whether you're looking to step into the reintegration space and serve as a kaimahi, kaiawhina or support worker, or whether you're a corrections officer or a case manager or a probation officer, or just interested in wondering what it's like for former prisoners when they transition out of prison back into the world, then this video is for you. So with that being said, we'll dive into the first lesson, and that is overwhelm. What I didn't anticipate before going into this work was how overwhelming it would be for former prisoners transitioning from prison and into the real world or back into the community. They've gone from this very structured, very restrictive, very disciplined space whereby they've built and created some pretty strong bonds and friendships and connections whilst they've been inside there as well. And they've been released or transitioned out, released on parole, or they've been released fully because they've served their sentence, back into a world which can seem quite chaotic, foreign, and disjointed. I didn't anticipate how overwhelming it would be on top of that. What I mean by that is the use of technology, the public transport system, just going to the shops to buy groceries and food. All of these things played a huge part in how it was being perceived and how the information was being received by those former prisoners being released into the community. They all shared how overwhelming it is and how overwhelming it felt. And when that happens, a number of them can withdraw within themselves, or they can find it very difficult to adjust. To a real small degree, I could relate to that. Being a former soldier, and when I left the military, I could empathize with the feeling and sense of overwhelm, and also the sense of loss that happens. Granted, they've come from this restrictive environment, disciplined, and they probably want to get out of there. But for many of those that have served considerable amount of time in prison, it's also a place that they know. It's a place that they are comfortable. It's a place that they feel familiar with. And as weird as it might sound, it's a place that they actually feel safe. So when I say I could relate, I came out of this environment of the Special Air Service. I was privileged to serve, highly structured, very disciplined, and I felt like I was part of a brotherhood for me personally. Lost great men who have got your back, who had my back, and I wanted to do everything that I could to make sure that I had theirs in training and on operations. And so when you transition out of that, there is a sense of emptiness. There is a sense of insecurity, at least there was for me. There was a little sense of apprehension and anxiety. I wouldn't call it fear, but wondering what's next, because that place in the military was such a big part of my life. It was such a focal point of where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. Now I don't have it. So what's next? And so coming back to the former prisoners, when they're overwhelmed and when they're looking at these, there's a massive sense of loss. There's a sense of uncertainty. There's a sense of anxiety. There may be fear. The men that I've spoken with whilst working in that space didn't mention any fear, but they did mention anxiety. They did mention worrying and concern about what they were going to be doing, how difficult things would be. And so the actionable lesson for anybody that's in this space is keeping that in mind, trying to put yourselves in their shoes, not being sympathetic, not sympathizing with where they're at, but a level of empathy is helpful to be able to have an understanding of what it is that they're going through. And if while you're going through that process, you can identify something that either you have experience in or in a way that enables you to be able to relate to what they're going through, like I was with my military sort of transition period, then that will set you in good stead to be able to continue to guide, mentor, and support these men as they make their way into the society. And just before I wrap up on this one, this video isn't to try to create a woe is me, feel sorry for the former prisoners, life is so hard. That's not what this video is about. It's to hopefully provide some insight from some lived experience, namely mine, and without me sharing the names of individuals, I'll share some of the information based on conversations that I've had with former prisoners as well as with the staff. So don't think we're here, and don't think that I'm here to try to get people to feel sorry for former prisoners, because that's not the purpose of the video. So that's lesson number 1, overwhelm. Being mindful of that, it is something to watch out for, and helping those individuals that are experiencing that, letting them know that that's okay, that they can step back, that they can take their time. It's an opportunity to learn a new routine, to learn and get familiar with a new environment, to learn and meet new people, all of those things. It's a massive opportunity, and to try to help them settle into the space that they're in. As I mentioned, I'll be using a few broad brushstrokes for this video because there is a heck of a lot to delve into, and I don't want this video going for 8 hours. So with that, we'll jump into lesson number 2, which is entitlement and manipulation. I've sort of added that piece in there, but more so the entitlement, and there is a level of manipulation that happens as well. So what do I mean by that? I was surprised when I went into the reintegration space at just how entitled a number of former prisoners were and are. And from my observations, some of that is likely developed through maybe it's a survival technique within the prison. But what I have seen is that a lot of that, or a bunch of that, has been developed whilst they've been inside, through not necessarily through fault of their own, but sometimes unintentionally through the really good proactive efforts and genuine sincere efforts of case managers within the correction system. Case managers who have got 30 plus people on their caseload. And what I mean by that, case managers who are assigned a number of prisoners, and it is their job to help them. It's their job to help them get into programs. It's their job to prepare them for the parole board. It's their job to write up a whole bunch of reports, to get documents for them, to make sure that they read, sign, and consent, etc. They've got a heck of a lot of work on, case managers. I don't envy that role at all. And if anybody comes across a case manager and is working with one, I highly recommend and encourage you to give them the respect that they deserve, to be patient with them, to understand that life happens for them as well. This is the same for former prisoners. But anyway, I digress slightly. I do think that through some of the unintentional actions and behaviors of case managers, trying to be super helpful of the people that they are supporting, former prisoners develop this sense of entitlement. What do I mean by that? Well, oftentimes referral applications would come through to the centre or to our service that were filled out by the case managers. Now, our referral forms, our inquiry forms, we expect the person that wants to come to us, so in this case, the person who's currently a prisoner still behind the wire, that they fill out the form in their writing, and that they then sign and date it, so that we can see that they're putting in some effort to want to come to where we are. Rather than having the case manager fill everything out, make everything look all nice and pretty, then they print it off, then they take it to the person, and the person just signs it and dates it, often without even reading it. So that's what I mean, that unintentional development or enabling of entitlement is where sometimes, in my experience, and I've had some conversations with some very open to feedback case managers, which was fantastic, and ask them to please not do that, and ask them to print out the form and take it back to the person and ask them to fill it out. And they did. And when I explained to them what we're not trying to create and enable, and that things will be very different should they make it here, they were very understanding and open, and they were happy to take that on board, and they went and ran with it. So it shows some effort on the individual if they're willing to put some work in. So just watch out for that sense of entitlement. It can creep in if they make it into your service, whereby it'll be, well, I've got to sign up at the medical centre, or I've got to create a new bank account, or I've got to go to Work and Income for support and get on the list there. I've got to enroll on this course, whatever it is. All of those things you can set yourself up, or you can be set up to then start thinking, oh, I need to fill out the forms for them because, they've been in prison for so long and they don't know how this works and they're not sure and they need my help. And that can make you feel wanted, needed. And you're like, oh, yeah, great. I helped Joe do this thing. I helped Joe with all of these things. Great that you did that, but not great at the same time. We don't want to enable a dependency behavior and pattern that's going to be ongoing. We want to enable independence. We want to empower them, former prisoners, we want to empower them to be able to take on those challenges and do them themselves. If they need support, we're there to support. I'll be beside you. But where it says, you see that little box where it says name, that means you put your name there. So you grab that pen and you write your name. You see the next box, it says surname. Yep, that's your surname. You put your surname in there. I don't need to do that for you. You as a kaimahi, kaiawhina support worker, you don't need to do that work for them. You need to be helping enable them to do it themselves. Teach them, learn how to live again, enable them to do things themselves. Watch out for the manipulation. So I did say that I added that on there. There is a little bit of manipulation in there. There is a little bit of gamesmanship that some of them will try, knowing that they're very capable and competent of doing it. But if they can, and if they can get somebody else to do something for them, like those habits that they learn in prison, then you can 100% guarantee that they're going to take advantage of that and they'll do it. And it'll be further down the track when you look back and scratch your head and go, that bloody bugger, he made me do all of that. So you don't want to be that person. So that's lesson number 2, entitlement and manipulation. And that brings me to lesson number 3, and that is different sentence lengths. When I went into this space and into this work, really I knew about life sentences and remand. I'd heard that term. Those are probably the only 2 things that I knew. What I discovered going into this space, there's a whole bunch of things in there. You know, you've got life sentences and remand. Yep, you've got preventative sentences. You've got bail. You've got home detention. You've got community sentences or community services. There's a list of things within that correction space, jargon, terminology, short sentences, short laggers, long laggers, all these terms that were foreign to me that I wish I knew and understood. To give some context around what I mean by the different sentence lengths, is not that that's hard or difficult. It's about how, at least within our service, whether you're a life sentencer or a short sentencer, you're combined in the one service. Now, just to anybody that may be wondering, the only exclusions for our particular service that I worked at there was 2. One was if you were a sexual offender of any kind against adults or children, or whether you had high or complex needs, so severe mental health issues, you were excluded. You were not considered for service at our particular reintegration service. Anybody else, though, was fair game. So if you had a disability, say you had a missing limb, say you had a speech impediment, say you had epilepsy, that didn't exclude you from being considered for our service. Now, what I mean by the sentences is that when you've got long laggers or life sentences mixed in with those that have served a short, in comparison, a considerably shorter period of time, and they're in the one service, it's a challenge for many, many reasons, far more than I can delve into on here. But what I wanted to highlight and share for you is that understanding the differences between the sentence lengths, you are going to get vastly different behaviors, characteristics, mannerisms, routines, communication style. So it's really important that you are aware of that, and that if you're working in a service that has a combination or a mixture of different sentence lengths, then it's going to be really helpful for you to find out a bit of information about who are the life sentences, who are the long laggers, who are the short sentences, who are those that have only done in comparison, again, a small amount of time compared to the 15, 20, 30 plus year lag over here. So hopefully that helps. The actionable item is to identify and know who those individuals are within your service, build relationship, rapport, and trust with them as best you can, and be alert and aware, conscious of the different traits and characteristics that they're going to have, and then try to work with those. I'm an advocate for having separate reintegration services for life sentences and for short sentences. And very quick story, the reason why I'm an advocate for that is this. Most reintegration services will have a 6, 12, maybe 18-month time whereby former prisoners or those released on parole can come to that service and use that time to get educated, get support, go into employment, etc., to reintegrate. And as we know, reintegration takes time, whether you're a former soldier or whether you're a former prisoner or wherever it is that you come from. Reintegration takes time, support, patience, etc. Having a life sentencer mixed in with those short sentences, the needs of support, the level of care and attention required for those two cohorts is night and day. They're massive. And so a 6, 12, 18-month reintegration service may be great for what's deemed to be a short sentencer, somebody who's done a couple of years, maybe 3 to 5 years, maybe even less than that. Those types of reintegration services may be just fine. When you've got individuals that have done a 10 plus, 15 plus, 20 plus, 30 plus year lag, one stint, without ever getting any release and coming into the community, and they're expected to try to adjust, reintegrate, learn, educate, get a job, reconnect with family, learn how to socialize again, all these sorts of things, when they haven't had that exposure for many, many years, you're fighting a very difficult uphill battle to help them make those changes. And speaking with one of the life sentences who served more than 30 plus years, the story has always stuck with me. He says, 18 months, that's great. 2 years, that's awesome if I can stay there that long. But that's just a drop in the ocean for me. I've been in here more than 30 years. I need probably at least 4, 5, 6 years of reintegration and support if I'm going to have a chance. Otherwise, I'll just end up back in here. And that's me not trying to do a straight up imitation of the individual, but trying to use their words, their voice, and what they shared. That resonated with me because, again, I thought of my military time, and it took me a good 4 or 5 years to really sort of reintegrate and settle into this civilian life. And I really struggled with it. So a person that's spent considerable amount of time in prison is going to struggle a heck of a lot more than what I did. Bear in mind, I wasn't in prison. I was in the military. Yep, there's structure, there's discipline, there's routine, etc. But at the end of the day, I knock off, I leave, I go home. I'm in the community, I'm in the world. I still know how things work. I know what's happening in the changes in my environment. I know what's happening in the world, being able to keep up to date with current affairs, all that sort of stuff. So very, very small in terms of my adjustment. If it took me 3, 4, 5 years to adjust, you can imagine, or hopefully you can imagine how challenging and overwhelming and how difficult that's going to be for somebody who's spent so long in prison. So anyway, I've spoken enough about lesson number 3. That is around the different sentence lengths. Please keep that in mind, and hopefully this information helps. So we'll jump into lesson number 4. And lesson number 4 is around personal bias. This one here was really important for me because as a service manager, anybody coming into our service, their applications all came through me. I received their full criminal conviction history. I received their parole assessment reports. I received the New Zealand Parole Board outcome reports for them. If there were any psychological assessments that were done for them, I received those. If there was any judge's sentence, or the judge's sentencing notes, the summary of facts, I received all that information, and my job was to read through that. Now, as I read through that information, some of the crimes and offences that were committed in there by people that were applying wanting to come to the service, I would have nothing to do with them. I would want to have nothing to do with them if it were not for me working in that role at the time as the service manager. There's no way I wouldn't have sat down with them. I wouldn't have shared a cup of tea with them. I wouldn't have offered them anything. I would not want to associate with them. So I struggled with that. And because I realized that a couple of days into my job in the role, that I was trusted to serve in as the service manager, I had to have a pretty hard conversation with myself, an honest conversation with myself, and ask myself, can I do this job? Am I the right person for this job? I hate what I'm reading in these documents. This person has just murdered a child, and the child wasn't even theirs. I hated what I was reading. It was making me angry and upset, and my automatic instinct when I got to those points was, nah. And I just flicked them off to the side. Without going too deep and too long into that, because I could talk about that for quite a long time, the challenges that I struggled with. Long story short is that after a few days, I reconciled myself to the fact of these things. I was able, and I was the person for the job. I was able to reconcile the fact that these people are looking for a second chance, that the service that I was a part of, that's the whole intention of it, to give an opportunity for those that earn it to be able to reintegrate, to reduce the recidivism or to stop them from reoffending so that they can live a life that's positive and contributing to their community and to their family, and hopefully learn from those lessons and pay it forward down the track. I was part of a service that believed in all of that sort of stuff and that had the tikanga and foundations of a Te Ao Māori worldview. It was wonderful. It still is wonderful. It's still operating today. I just no longer work there. So with that, I realized that I could, and also because of that support, and also because the offending that I was reading, as horrendous as it was, and as upsetting as it was, to me at least anyway, reading it, and I don't say this to be disrespectful to the victims or to those that have been affected by those that have committed the same crimes or similar crimes. But because it didn't affect me or anybody that I knew personally, so it didn't affect me directly or closely indirectly, I knew that I was able to put aside my bias and go, okay, but I'm still going to assess you. You still got to have an interview with me, and in that interview you might not like it, and I'm going to be direct and straight to the point with you and ask you some pretty hard questions, and you need to give me the honest answers. And if I don't think you're being honest with me, I'm going to tell you straight, and I'm going to let you know that if you can't be honest now, then you're more than likely not going to be honest when you get here, and so it's up to you whether or not you want to give yourself the best chance to come here or not. So I was able to put aside my bias and use that and then go into it. But the one last quick piece that I'll share here on this personal bias, and it's an important story which one of my team members shared with me or came to me. So it's an interaction that happened. Because I realized my biases, I struggled with that for a bit, went back and forth, landed on, yep, I can do this. I felt it was important to share that with my team. I brought my team in together, spoke about these, said, hey, this is what I've been battling with and struggling with internally. Not that it's your concern, I've reconciled myself to that now. But I need each of you to know that if you're going to work here, that you need to be comfortable and confident that you can provide the level of support and guidance and mentoring to these men as you can, as possible, without feeling upset or hurt or feeling any anger or any sort of way about the things that they've done. Because some of the crimes that they've committed are terrible. And as a father, you as parents to my team, when I was speaking to them, you as parents, you as grandparents, some of you, you may really struggle like I did. And so I'm putting this out there. I was struggling with that. But here's what I'll say. Because it doesn't affect me personally or indirectly, or doesn't affect those that I know personally either, I'm able to do this job. So as long as you, and this is speaking to the team, as long as our team is okay with this, and as long as you can reconcile the fact that you're here to serve, and here's these two fantastic iwi with the support of corrections, with all these other external factors that can help support this service, then we need to do as much as we can to help support these men. Now, we had that conversation. It went for a bit long, or a lot longer than that, in one of our weekly team meetings. Went back to my office. Thought, yep, cool. The team is on the same page. We're happy with that. One of the team members came in and spoke with me, and he let me know, hey, my brother was murdered. Here in New Zealand, the person who murdered him is currently serving a life sentence in one of the Auckland prisons. And what he said was, and as far as I know, he doesn't have any sexual offending history and he doesn't have any serious mental health issues. So he could be eligible for our service. I said, yes. He said, I need to let you know that if he ever came here, or if he was ever approved to come here, I can't stay here. I can't work here. I hear what you said in our meeting, and I'm on board with that. But the same as you, those people that you're assessing, they don't affect you personally, so you can work with it. You can work with them, I should say. I'm in the same boat. That individual, if his application ever landed on our desk here, and if I was ever assigned to go work with him, to support him, to help him, to make sure to assess him, to make sure that he's ready to come here, I would not be able to do it. Before he even got to that point, I knew where he was going, and I had already formulated a response. And my response to him was simple. Brother, that's okay. You don't have to. You don't have to worry about that person who murdered your brother ever stepping foot into this service, not while I'm the service manager and not while you're working here. As a manager, as a leader, you need to be prepared to look out for and look after your team. It's not just about my own personal bias. It's about considering your team's personal bias and the impacts on your team with individuals and the things that they may have done. So I'm grateful that he had that conversation with me. I'm grateful that I learned that in that space and time around my personal biases. I'm really glad that I was able to reconcile to myself that, yeah, I can do this job, and that he spoke with me and that we're on the same page. So that's lesson number 4 in navigating personal biases. I'm mindful that there's still 4 more, and I'm taking a heck of a lot of time, but there's a lot of information, so I'm trying to condense it as quick as I can. So the actionable lesson for personal biases is being aware of what yours are, addressing those things, putting them out in the open with your team if you have to, and then getting the feedback, learning from each other, drawing from that, and then coming to a united decision that you can all work with and feel comfortable with, that's in line with the tikanga and kawa, excuse me, or the values and rules of that service that you're there working to support, and the individuals who are part of that. So we'll jump into lesson number 5. And lesson number 5 is perspectives of former prisoners and family members. So there's 2 key perspectives here that are really important when you're working in the reintegration space, or if you're looking to go into that space. And that is from starting with the former prisoner first. Former prisoner, spoken about, come from this concrete jungle. They've been in this very hardened environment where survival is a daily occurrence, where they're looking over their shoulder, where they're trying to defend, protect themselves, as well as still look out for the friends that they make in there, the bonds, the connections. The other aspect is the family who has, through no fault of their own, they're now being forced to live without that family member. And typically the wife or the spouse or the partner is now thrust into this position of they have to now not only be the provider for the family, they have to also be the protector. Because the protector, and if I use the male as the protector in this case, in this example, they've been locked up in prison. So now they have to hold down the front, provide and protect the loved ones, get the kids ready for school, get them to and from school, get them to and from their sporting activities, birthday parties, whatever, all the different activities that life brings with it, all shouldering the responsibility on their own. And they do that, no sweat, no problem. And they do that because it's greater than them, their loved ones, their children, etc. But it's hard. It's difficult. So you've got these 2 critical pieces of the puzzle, the former prisoner and the family perspective, that have been really struggling. It's very, very difficult for them. So we come back to the former prisoner. They come out now, they're released. They've got some release conditions. When they come to our service, typically they're not, they can catch up and meet with their family every day. They may even, and they can eventually work towards, having weekend leave. whereby they get to spend a few nights away or a couple of nights away with their family. But otherwise, there's a curfew set on the service and most services. Whatever that curfew timing might be, the individuals that have been released to our service by the parole board have to abide by that curfew. Otherwise, they're in breach and they could be recalled and go back to prison. So even though they've come out of this heavily restrictive environment, there's still restrictions on them, and they've still got to play ball and they've still got to abide by the rules. The families, they may not and often don't fully understand that. So it's important when you're in this space, whether you're a service manager or whether you're a support worker, that if you can bridge the gap between the families and the individuals and your reintegration service in the middle, whereby people are going to be coming and then living and interacting, it's great if you can get that. Otherwise, what potentially can happen is that families don't understand, or can get to the point where they don't understand. Children, why can't I stay at dad's? Why can't dad come home? Well, the reintegration services aren't set up, for the most part, at least our one wasn't, aren't set up for young children and family members and partners to come and spend the night within the service at the reintegration service that we're running. It is for the men that have been released from prison to have their space. Okay, it's not a free-for-all for families to just come and stay there and live there. They can come and visit. The men can go out and hang out with their family during the day, but once that curfew time, they need to be back before the curfew, and then they're on site until the next day when the curfew timing is lifted, and then they can go out again about their business. So because families don't understand that, and children, it's hard. The spouse, the partner may find it difficult as well. The former prisoner, who's now getting all this information and these requests, and they know that they can't go and be there with their family full-time the way that they would want to, they can start to feel stressed. And leading back to that overwhelm again, they can start to feel like, this is too hard. And they can be tempted to breach or self-sabotage. Not always the case. Sometimes they just make stupid mistakes and they just reoffend, let's be honest. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it here and say, they felt scared and they were worried about everything, so they self-sabotaged. They drank some alcohol and took some drugs again because they wanted to go back to prison. That's BS. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are times when people do self-sabotage to go back in, but for the most part of what I saw is just people being dumb and making a stupid decision in the spur of the moment, not thinking of the consequences, forgetting the tikanga and kawa of the service that they were in, forgetting the words and their commitment that they made, and decided to do something stupid. So anyway, I digress. When they can't, and sometimes when all that information is coming and they may not be able to deal with it, they may feel like, because some of the former prisoners that I've worked with and spoken with, they've said, oh man, it just gets in your head, and I'm like, I might as well just go back inside. I might as well just be back in prison until the end of my sentence, and then when I'm released, at least I can go back and be with my family. What they're missing is, they could do that, but they're missing out on the growth opportunity by using the reintegration step. You think about it. They've gone into prison, committed this crime. Gone into prison, spent however long in there. Maybe they've got to do some programs, maybe they haven't. Maybe they got to do some things that helped address their offending, maybe they haven't. Say they haven't. They come back out, they're still the same person. They've still got the same mindset that they had when they went in. Maybe not, maybe it's adjusted a little bit, but they haven't necessarily learnt anything new. Now they're coming back home, maybe sort of the same or maybe mostly the same, but without any skills, without any education, without a job, and they don't have the support. They don't know where to go to, where to look. Our reintegration service has the value of being able to provide all of that. So if you get released, you come out, you're a certain version of yourself. You get to that service, you take advantage of it, and you learn and you cling to the things, or you grab as much as you can to help better your future prospects of employment, of connection, whatever it might be. By the time you transition out of that reintegration service back to your family, they get a new and improved version of yourself. They get a 2.0 version. If you stay the course and have the discipline and have the mana to stick to what it is that you said that you would do. And so hopefully the learning here and the actionable lesson is that and if you're working in this space, identifying former prisoners and explaining, educating, mentoring them, helping them take advantage of the space that they're in to become a better version of themselves by the time they leave. At the same time, if you get the opportunity to work with the families, as I mentioned, and trying to bring the two sides together and educating them, helping them understand that, hey, this is temporary. I get it. It's hard. But do you think, you've been handling this for the last 3 years, for the last 4 or 5 years, 2 years on your own. You've done an incredible job, fantastic job. People don't have the right to ask more of you to do it any longer than what you need to. But do you think, you could stick it out for another 6 months, another 12 months, 18 months? You still get to see them every day. And over time, the weekend leaves will become longer and longer. There'll be opportunities to, go from weekends to 4 days, to 5 days, to a whole week's leave, and multiple weeks leave consecutive in a row. Do you think you could stick it out a little bit longer? And while that's happening, you're going to get all of this. The person's going to come in. You're going to see the changes. You're going to feel the changes. And both sides, you as the family and your partner as the former prisoner out on parole, are going to merge together better than ever, better than where you were before. Can you do that? So trying to bring those two sides together, when you can sit them in the same room and have that conversation and outline, this is what we've seen, this is what we've learned in the past, and this is the path that we feel would be really helpful so that you can move forward. When that's happened, families have been open and receptive to it. And I think, hopefully, if you're watching this, you can see how that makes sense. But you need to take the time to communicate to them, and you need to have that conversation with them. So that's lesson number 5, trying to see things from the former prisoner's perspective, but equally important, the family's perspective, and trying to bring those two parties together. All right, so we'll jump into lesson number 6. And lesson number 6 is around competent and supportive staff. This is really important. As a service manager, I had, and they still are, super supportive, empathetic staff, very broad experiences. Some are grandparents, some are new parents, some were young, some are middle-aged. And that diversity is great for a number of reasons, and I'm not going to delve into all those here. But the key part is around competent support staff. You want staff that have the strength to say no when they need to, that have the strength and the ability to take the moments that they have with the former prisoners or the parolees and use those as teaching moments to help them understand that where they are now and where they've come from to get to where they are is a massive step. And that, yes, this thing that they're trying to do now in the space that they're in may be difficult right now, but with some effort, with some persistence, and with some support, they can progress beyond anything that they thought was possible if they're willing to do their part and put in the work. So what we don't want, and what you don't want to be, if you're looking at this because you're looking at going into that work, is you don't want to be a support worker that is, I think they use the term helicopter parenting. You don't want to be the person that's doing everything for this individual, for the parolee, for the former prisoner, for this person. You want to be the person that's enabling and empowering them, encouraging them, and expecting them to put in the work because they can. They're capable. Now, here's the thing. If they can't read, fine, keep the pipe. You read the information for them. You explain it. If there's things like that that they can't do, yes, we do it. And you help support in documentation, yes, that's fine. But the teaching moment and the opportunity is, hey, this is great. We can do this for you whilst you're here in this service. But you need to understand something. When you leave, we're not going to be there. You're going to want to be able to do these things yourself. So how about we start looking at addressing your reading and writing issues or concerns? or abilities, whatever it is. How about you make a start and I'll support you so that you can start addressing these. There's plenty of great resources out there, plenty of free resources as well, and plenty of people who are willing to give their time to help people like you get better educated and do the things that you need to do. How about we do that? You need staff that are willing to do that, not staff that are, whatever they ask, if they need anything, I just give it to them. I just want to give. I just want to help them. We're not saying to not have that mindset and not have that attitude. We're not trying to strip you of that manaakitanga that you have, that wairuatanga. Not trying to strip you of who you are when it comes to giving and helping and supporting. But if you're a support worker or a person that goes in with that mindset, you're going to make it very difficult on the rest of your team, because that's going to be the expectation. That's going to be the entitlement that will come back. Well, Joe did it for me. Why can't you do it? Well, Joe always does this. Why don't you do it? Well, Sarah always did this for me. Why can't you do it? And you don't want to be doing that for your team. Your team needs to be united and needs to be empowered to make sure that they can empower those that are in your service. So the actionable lesson here is, yes, be a good person. Yes, be a good listener. Yes, take the time to empathize with the challenges and struggles that the individual's going through at that time. But be strong enough and have the courage to coach, to mentor, to counsel them, and to pull them up, to tell them, bro, you're just being an idiot, or stop being a sook. You just need to pick your lip up and get on with it. Have the courage to have those conversations. Obviously, you're going to want to build the relationship first before you go telling the person to pick your lip up or stop being a sook and just crack on, you egg. If you go into doing or saying things like that straight off the bat, it's probably going to go down like a lead balloon, and there will potentially be some friction, for want of a better term. So hopefully that helps. Be supportive, yes, but don't overdo it and don't think you have to do everything for them. Empower them to be able to take the lead and do things themselves. All right? So that leads me into lesson number 7. And that is another really important one, which I discovered whilst I was in. I wish this wasn't the case, but it was. So lesson number 7 is around having an assessment process and structure. Man, I was surprised and disappointed personally that there was not a robust assessment criteria or assessment process and structure when looking at these referrals that come through and then filtering through those that are just trying to play the game, They just want to look good for the parole board. They just want to be able to say, oh yeah, look, I've applied to here and they've accepted me, and yep, I've ticked that box, so I've got reintegration and I'm going to be going here, and so yep, that improves my chances for the parole board. Nah, I was disappointed that that structure wasn't in place. And so when I identified that huge gap, conducting a 15-30 minute interview or chat with an individual who's currently still behind the wire and thinking, yep, they'll be a good fit, is BS. That's not the way any reputable reintegration service, in my opinion, should be conducting an assessment process of somebody to come into your service to get the support that they need. Because if you think about it, if I'm a former prisoner and you're having a conversation with me and I've learned these skills of manipulation, of communication, of trying to get things that I want or trying to twist things to suit my situation to get any advantage that I can, because that's the time that they've got to develop these skills whilst they're inside. I can tell you now, I'm going to tell you whatever it is that I think you want to hear. Oh, yeah, would I do that? Yeah, of course. Yeah, I love that stuff. Oh, we're a Kaupapa Maori run service. Speaking te reo Maori as part of the kaupapa. Are you willing to step in? Oh, yeah. I love te reo Maori. I love te reo Maori. I'd love to learn that. That's always been. I've always felt that's been like a part that's been missing, and I use that accent there because the service, yeah, Kaupapa Maori run service, but it's open to anybody. Doesn't matter if you're European, Asian, Indian, Russian, whatever. The service is founded on Kaupapa Maori, Te Ao Maori worldview principles, and it's open to anybody. But then you get these people that will just want to say whatever it is that they think it is that you want to hear, just to give themselves that tick in the box to go, yes. So structure and process is important. I'm not going to go into the whole structure and process involved around ours, but it was long, and it is long. And it's intentionally long, and there's specific purposes and goals in each one of those assessments that are conducted right from that first assessment, which was always conducted by me. As the service manager, anybody coming in, I need to be comfortable that A, this person is genuine for what it is that they say that they're going to do and that they want that chance. B, that they're going to be a good fit with the current men that we have in service and the staff. 3, that they're not going to pose a risk to any of our staff or the other men or the community with which we're in. And so there's a lot riding on it, on the service and on their success. Because if I just stick with the 15, 30-minute script and there wasn't even a script left, that was just we just have a chat with them. If we need to have a second meeting with them, we will. And if we think they're a good fit, then we'll tick the box and let them come. No, that process is not good enough if you're working in the space. That's my opinion, and it's based on what I've observed. People will tell you whatever it is that they think you want to hear to get what they want. And so you need to have a better process than that. All right. So we'll jump into the last lesson, which is lesson number 8, because I'm mindful of the time. And lesson number 8 is transitioning from reintegration back into the community. That's the 8th lesson. So having an understanding of this, if you work in the reintegration space, I'd encourage you to get a really good understanding of all those other 7, but also have a strong understanding of this as well. The reintegration service is they're in a holding pattern. It's a temporary place where they come, where they're going to hopefully learn skills, basic life skills, where they're going to learn how to communicate again, where they're going to upskill their education, where they're going to hopefully move into employment, get licenses, whatever it is. Learn how the accommodation process works, learn how to maintain their home. There's a bunch of skills that happen in that space. And understanding that, what gets lost sometimes is that people forgetting that your service, your reintegration service, is just a temporary place. Their journey is far beyond the walls of your transitional service. They're going somewhere else. They're going back home, or they may have to, because their family may not want to have anything to do with them. They may have to be empowered and equipped to be able to be self-sufficient, to live on their own. And so helping them, or as a staff member, knowing that that's the purpose, you want to try to plan early. You want to try to plan to set up the individuals with the individuals early. So if your service is 6 months, realistically, you really want to be working on, or be at least starting what transition looks like for them out of your service at the 3-month mark. Earlier if you can, depending on how they're progressing. If your service is 12 months, then you want to be 6-month mark. You want to be looking at transition. What are the other support services in that area that they're going to? They're transitioning from Napier, Gisborne, and they're going to Auckland, wherever it is that they might be going. What services are there that we can connect them with, that we can help them? What employment services or opportunities are there? What counselling services are there? What medical centre is close by? What are the area, or what area is it that they're going to be living in? The accommodation, like all of that, there's so much to help the individual with. There's so much for them to do, that the earlier you start on that, the better off they'll be. If you leave that transitioning from reintegration to another service or to another part of the country till the last month or even 2 months, you're leaving it far too late. And then if you start scrambling and panicking because the sky's falling and it's 2 weeks before they go, you're not setting those individuals up for success when they leave. They are going to struggle. They're going to find it hard, incredibly hard, They're not going to know where to go, and they're going to be constantly calling back and or asking to come back to the service. And if that happens, you need to understand that as a reintegration service, you haven't done as well as what you could have. You've potentially failed them by not helping set them up or equipping them for success by the time they transition out of your reintegration service. And that's not something that you want to be a part of. You want to help the success. You want to help achieve the outcomes. So I could delve into all 8 of these for long periods of time. I probably could have done a video on each one of these, and maybe I will. Actually, I think I will. But for now, just getting these 8 out there, I wanted to put this out there. Gone for nearly an hour. Apologies about that. But hopefully these 8 lessons can help you with regards to whether you currently work in this space. Like I said, you might be a corrections officer, you might be a case manager, a probation officer, you might already work in the reintegration space, and or you may be looking to step into the reintegration space and serve and work. On top of that, you could be a family or a family member who hopefully now, if you've watched this video, hopefully you have a better idea of some of the challenges and the learnings and insights from a personal perspective that I think are helpful for anybody before they step into the reintegration space and or before they start getting involved. And I didn't even include in here restorative justice. That could be a 9th one, but we'll leave that for another time. So I sincerely hope that this video helps. There's 8 lessons in there: the overwhelm, the entitlement and manipulation, the different sentence lengths, personal biases, family and former prisoner perspectives, having competent and supportive staff, the assessment structure and processes required when you're looking at who's coming in, and transitioning from the reintegration service back out into the community. I hope this helps, and I hope that you can apply it into your own situation if this is a space that you're working in or looking to work into. If you've got any comments or questions or thoughts, I'd really love to hear them down below around any one of the topics or lessons that I've shared. And when I see those, I'll look to try to respond to those as soon as I can. Like I said, I think I'm going to make a video around these 8, potentially 9 lessons separately, because they actually cover a heck of a lot of information. So once again, thanks very much for your time. If you'd like to like and subscribe before you go, that would be awesome if you could do that. If not, regardless, thank you very much for stopping by anyway, and we'll see you in the next video.